In the Star Wars universe, it was a symbol of the Rebel Alliance. It was the starfighter that Luke Skywalker piloted to destroy the Death Star, an iconic machine that stood for rebellion, for the struggle against oppressors, and for the destruction of the evil empire seeking to conquer the galaxy. We are, of course, talking about the X-Wing. How fitting it is, then, that a drone Ukraine is set to receive has been given that very name. Just as the X-Wing was vital to the Rebel Alliance in Star Wars, this insane experimental weapon from Lithuania is poised to leave Russia shocked and its troops terrified. Lithuania was one of the first to cover this bold new weapon. On October 9th, the outlet reported that the Lithuanian defense company Granta Autonomy has formally unveiled a new loitering munition called the X-Wing, a vertical takeoff and landing, or VTOL, drone. The X-Wing has been subjected to extensive testing since the spring of 2025, and Granta Autonomy has stated that its key capabilities are confirmed and ready. That new drone is now heading to Ukraine. A small series of X-Wings is currently being manufactured and delivered for additional trials to frontline units of the armed forces of Ukraine. Granta Autonomy's founder and CEO, Gediminas Gwoba, explained to Militarny. Continuous operational use at the front is being used as part of the system S validation. In essence, Granta has pushed its new drone to the limit with laboratory testing. Now, it must prove itself in combat, and having Ukraine deploy this experimental drone is the ideal way to gauge its effectiveness against an enemy Lithuania believes could soon threaten its own territory, just as it does Ukraine. United 24 media also covered the incoming X-Wing, pointing out that the initial deployment of this experimental drone will be limited. Granta, however, is preparing for mass production, should the combat testing about to be done by Ukraine prove successful. By the start of next year, Granta anticipates it will have scaled up production to the point of making several hundred of these interesting airframes every month. If everything proceeds as Granta and Ukraine hope, 2026 could become the year that Ukraine uses a weapon with a very symbolic name to push back against a nation seemingly bent on domination. But before that, Ukraine must see if the X-Wing lives up to its name. At first glance, the new drone from Lithuania seems to be a very impressive piece of hardware. The basics, coming from Militarny, say the drone is interesting because it merges the VTOL capabilities of a standard quadcopter drone with a cruise flight function enabled by its X-shaped wings. This ability to cruise means the X-Wing can cover greater distances using less energy in cruise mode when compared to other small unmanned aerial vehicles Ukraine is deploying against Russia. This cruising capability also gives drone operators the power to attack Russian targets without needing any special infrastructure. As for its technical specifications, Gwoba provides one of the most crucial. An endurance range of 50 km is the initial specification, which will be improved. However, we will consistently balance the extended capabilities of the X-Wing with its production cost, Gwoba said to Militarny in October. That distance comes to about 31 miles, which is more than twice the 12-mile range of the typical FPV drone, as noted in an October 9th Forbes article. The X-Wing will also not be constrained by fiber optic cables, which gives it a significant advantage over those types of drones. Furthermore, note what Gwoba said. 50 kilometers is the baseline. Additional development will come after the testing phase in Ukraine, which means that later X-Wing versions will be able to fly even farther. Lithuania may have just provided Ukraine with a drone that could alter the entire dynamic of the battlefield. Medium-range strikes from relative safety could now become a reality. At the very edge of its range, an X-Wing could hit a Russian target while giving its operators more than enough time to evacuate before a Russian counterattack can arrive. Beyond that, we know the drone is able to carry an explosive payload that weighs around 4 kilograms, which is approximately 8.8 pounds. It's also quite fast, capable of hitting speeds up to 144 kilometers, or 89 miles per hour. That speed is critical. Slow-moving drones are susceptible to everything from air defenses to small arms fire. A drone that speeds along at almost 90 miles per hour is extremely difficult to target, especially if it flies low enough to the ground that air defense radars cannot detect its presence. Other significant features include a mix of daytime optics and a thermal imager, which allows the drone to be used 24 hours a day. That ability comes from Granta's micro-gimbal camera, which is also designed to keep operating in areas where global navigation satellite systems are jammed or denied. An X-wing operator can therefore maintain control at all times, regardless of the various electronic warfare tactics Russia might use. We also must not forget the Granta data link communication system. Granta has already made sure this system can communicate directly with the standard ground stations currently in use in Ukraine. The basic version of the X-wing also employs some artificial intelligence, or AI. Its guidance system has AI elements that let it identify and target camouflaged assets on the ground. This mix of features makes the X-wing a nightmare for Russia's forces. What Ukraine is about to get is an experimental drone that blends speed and agility, making it capable of evading Russia's countermeasures. The warhead used by the drone is also versatile because of its fragmentation properties. This means Ukraine can deploy the X-wing against personnel, lightly armored vehicles, and even radar stations. The latter would give Ukraine the ultimate irony of destroying the eyes of the very systems meant to be shooting its drones down. For Russia, the X-wing nightmare will only intensify in the future. Granta states that it is currently developing full swarm autonomy for its drones via a mesh network. With that technology implemented, Ukraine would be able to launch entire swarms of X-wings that can operate without human input and in concert with other X-wing drones connected to the same network. Swarm technology uses AI in ways that are far more interesting and destructive than simply allowing a drone to find hidden targets. The Wall Street Journal has covered this emerging tech, asserting that it represents the next frontier of drone warfare due to the vast potential that swarms provide. In theory, a swarm network could permit a user to link thousands of drones into a single network, which could all be used to overwhelm a target's defenses. Even a swarm of dozens would present a major challenge for Russia's soldiers. Imagine 20 or 30 X-wing drones, all flying nearly as one, yet also intelligent enough to fly in a formation that makes them hard for air defenses to shoot down. These drones are all locked onto a single target, and they will converge on that target all at once, from many different directions to guarantee a direct hit. This is the type of threat Granta intends to build into its X-wing drones, but it's not quite at that stage yet. We will explore the impact drone swarms could have on the Ukraine war in more detail later. In 2025, a single soldier costs Russia $31,200 a year, based on a CNN estimate from October that a first-year contract soldier in Ukraine makes about $2,600 monthly. This doesn't even factor in the lump sum payments that recruits get just for signing up for Russia's military. These one-off payments can be as much as $36,560 in some regions, which comes on top of a $4,900 payment soldiers get from Russia's federal government and the wages we just mentioned. An X-wing that eliminates one Russian soldier will cost Russia more than $70,000. Ukraine will have spent just $11,000. And if this new drone is as good at destroying lightly armored targets and radar systems as Granta says it is, the cost of Russia's losses could run into the millions for a comparatively small investment from Ukraine. To add some perspective, it is important to repeat that the X-wing is still in a trial period. Although it has proven itself in Granta's labs, Ukraine still needs to see if the new drone AS features make it a workable asset on the battlefield. Based on Granta's statements, it seems the rest of 2025 will be for combat testing its new drone, with the planned production increase for 2026, moving forward if and when the new X-wing proves its worth in Ukraine. Assuming the X-wing is all that Granta says it will have some interesting companions on the battlefield. For one, Ukraine itself has constructed a drone that has a striking similarity to Lithuania's experimental drone. Called the Flycat, this drone was shown by Oktava Defense in July, and it has capabilities similar to Granta's drone. These features include the capacity to loiter autonomously, find targets, and carry out kamikaze attacks, all without needing any satellite navigation. The warhead on this Ukrainian drone is a bit smaller, and the Flycat is also slightly slower and has a shorter range. Even so, the combination of these two drones would be the last thing Russia AS forces would want to see. United 24 also reports that just days before Granta announced the X-wing's arrival, Ukraine had finished a successful test of its new Juk drone. Also a fixed-wing loitering drone, but with a more standard design than the X-wing, the Juk has been able to strike targets at distances over 40 kilometers while navigating through heavy electrical interference. That is its purpose. The drone, created by a company called Atarna, was designed specifically to defeat Russia's electronic warfare countermeasures. One trial of the Juk saw it hit a target 67 kilometers, or 41 miles away, proving that Ukraine is just as skilled at making loitering munitions as its partners. None of this suggests that Ukraine is not interested in Granta's X-wing. Rather, the point being made is that these three drones signal several trends that are taking Ukraine to the next stage of its drone warfare strategy. It is no longer just about sheer numbers, although having many more drones on the battlefield than Russia is still very important. These three drones demonstrate a focus on beating electronic countermeasures to make sure the drones reach their targets no matter how much Russia tries to jam them. We are also observing a move toward autonomous target detection and striking, which makes the job of a drone operator much simpler. Plus, all three of these drones have remarkable ranges, with the X-wing being the leader, which could let Ukraine launch them from behind the front lines to hit Russia in the near rear. The X-wing is just one component of a rapidly growing drone evolution in Ukraine, and its arrival signals several negative developments for Russia. The potential for Ukraine to begin using drone swarms is one of those negative developments, although it is one that will not happen immediately, since Granta is still creating the swarm technology for the X-wing. Once that technology is ready, Russia will have a major problem to deal with. We have already touched on why when we talked about swarm technology earlier, but it is worth looking into what drone swarms really mean for the war in Ukraine. For one, swarming lets Ukraine do something like Russia's human wave assaults, but with drones. Forces News interviewed David Hambling in September 2025, and he described an interesting application for this type of technology. The attack drones will then come in as a swarm, and between them they will work out which drone attacks which target, so they don't all go with the same target, Hambling stated. We can see a key advantage right away. Ukraine AS operators do not need to waste time deciding what to attack, because the AI controlling the swarm does all that work for them. Less time spent by Ukraine also means less time for Russia to react to the incoming drones, which will lead to more effective strikes against many targets. Hambling goes on. And so you get one drone attacking each target in the first wave. After that, the reconnaissance drone will assess the damage, and then follow-up drones will be assigned to anything that's not destroyed until all the targets have been taken out, and the human commander just needs to verify that and say, "Job done, you can return home," he says. It is here that we see the imitation of Russia's human wave tactics. For Putin, human life is so cheap that he is prepared to send wave after wave of soldiers into the meat grinder to take out a target. The goal is attrition, but the human price is enormous. With drone swarms, Ukraine can launch the same type of assaults using machines instead of soldiers. Multiple waves will attack, with each wave following up on the actions of the one before it. Even if Russia is able to fight off the waves, Ukraine just loses drones. It doesn't lose its people. That is very important for Ukraine because, as Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty reported in August, Ukraine is facing a growing soldier shortage. The outlet reports on data from Poland's Center for Eastern Studies, or OSW, which states that Ukraine must recruit 300,000 soldiers each year to make up for the losses its brigades have suffered. Ukraine is not reaching that goal. It recruited 200,000 in 2024 and was recruiting between 17,000 and 24,000 people a month by August 2025. Even at the top of that range, it adds up to 288,000 recruits, 12,000 less than the number OSW says Ukraine needs. Drone swarms, along with Ukraine's other unmanned vehicles, might make it so that such massive recruitment is no longer needed. Autonomous drones that can operate on their own reduce the need for Ukraine to deploy as many soldiers. This is not to say that drones will replace humans. They can, however, certainly fill the voids left by over 3.5 years of intense fighting, letting Ukraine launch attacks and hold defenses without putting as many of its people in harm's way. A lower casualty rate also means that Ukraine doesn't need to recruit as many soldiers. We also cannot forget the effect that the X-wing will have on Russia, even without its future swarm abilities. The base model is designed as a death-dealing machine, and Russia could use far fewer deaths as it attempts to keep up the strength of its attacks on Ukraine. This is a country that has already lost over 1.12 million people to death, injury or capture, as per Ukraine's Ministry of Finance. And it is drones that are causing more direct harm to Russia than any other weapon. By April 2025, drones were said to be the cause of up to 80% of all casualties in the Ukraine war. Army technology used Russia's casualty data from April 8th to show what this means, noting that drones would have been responsible for 1,000 of the 1,300 losses Russia sustained on that day alone. The huge number of drones that now fly over the Ukrainian battlefield has created a situation where there is no safe place for Russia's soldiers, Hambling wrote on October 9th for Forbes. Hambling talked about how Ukraine has done a masterful job of giving itself a variety of drones it can use for short, medium and long-range missions. Lithuania's X-wing fits in the middle category, and it will be perfect for establishing kill zones in Ukrainian areas that are already occupied by Russia. Because of the drone's automated tracking and targeting, Ukraine just needs to launch some X-wing drones and let them do their work while it focuses its personnel on the front lines. Any new drone joining Ukraine's already large stockpiles is bad news for Russia. However, there is also a curious phenomenon that seems to be affecting Russia's forces right now. On October 8th, the new Voice of Ukraine reported that Russia's ratio of wounded to killed in combat has taken an abnormally high turn. The outlet shared data published by the Institute for the Study of War, which states that Russia is losing 1 soldier to death for every 1.3 soldiers that are wounded. The conclusion here is that Ukraine is becoming more lethal rather than just wounding Russia's forces. Or, given that up to 80% of casualties are from drones, it's Ukraine's unmanned vehicles that are getting more deadly. This Russian ratio is significant because a normal ratio is usually about 1 killed for every 3 injured, as the Harvard Kennedy School's Belfer Center explains. The X-wing is designed to be a lethal drone, and that is the last thing Russia's shaken troops want to see when so many more of them are dying. Finally, we must consider the fact that this drone is from Lithuania. Granta has mentioned that it is sending X-wing drones to Ukraine for combat testing. The company does not say if it is charging Ukraine for these drones, but it doesn't really make a difference. Even if Ukraine is paying, this transfer of technology shows that Ukraine is forging a stronger bond with a Baltic nation that is very concerned about what Putin might have in mind if he wins in Ukraine. Lithuania is so concerned about a future Russian invasion that officials in its capital city of Vilnius have already created an evacuation plan to be used if Putin ever manages to advance beyond Ukraine. That plan, which the BBC says describes how Lithuania would manage the evacuation of about 540,000 people, is in place, because Vilnius is very near the 422-mile border that Lithuania has with Belarus. Putin used Belarus as a launching point for his invasion of Ukraine. Lithuania wants to be prepared if Russia's leader attempts to do the same thing again. Any links that Lithuania and Ukraine create benefit both. The latter gets access to technology, like the X-wing, that it might not have the time or money to create itself. The former helps a country that it is depending on to beat Russia, because Lithuania thinks that it could be next if Ukraine falls. The X-wing will not win the war for Ukraine, of course, but it is one more piece fitting into place for Ukraine's growing drone army. And when swarm technology is added to the drone, and Granta has expanded its manufacturing capacity, the X-wing could become the stuff of nightmares for Putin's forces on the front lines in Ukraine. It is also not just Lithuania that is giving Ukraine weapons. Greece has just delivered a slap to Putin by sending Ukraine firepower it can use to break Russia. Find out more in our video, and be sure to subscribe to Warzone Party for more coverage of the new and interesting weapons Ukraine uses in its battle against Russia's invading forces.